Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with justice. So, justice is one of the most fundamental and oldest concept in political theory. It is often referred to as first virtue of social institutions given by John Rawls, and it is rightly said so because it represents the moral foundation upon which laws, governance, and social structures are built. Justice is the very brick upon which the whole building of polity is built. Now, as of literal definition, justice means giving everything what is due to them. It is also about fairness, equality, and morality in society. But there are certain questions that keep echoing through generations. We can call them eternal questions, especially regarding the very life one is going to live. So these questions, such as what is justice, who decides what is just, and how can a just society be created, all these questions they keep changing the form, they keep changing the interpretations, but they are still relevant. Likewise, the first political philosopher that might have belonged to the time when writing first appeared around 3000 BC in Mesopotamia, then somewhere along the line, the period of classical antiquity, then the Greek and the Roman Empire, all of these civilizational features, civilizational thresholds, they have grappled with this question, with these questions, and now the same questions in the contemporary time, we are also looking at them, we are staring at them and trying to find an answer that can justify a just living. Now, in modern times, John Rawls' theory of justice, it revived the discourse, the discussion on this particular topic. His thought experiment, The Veil of Ignorance, the original position, they proposed that rational individual they would choose principle that ensure maximum benefit for the least advantage. Now I'm going to give a brief overview about this thought experiment, original position and veil of ignorance. So this thought experiment it revolves around what kind of society man would create if it is not aware about his own position in that society. So that's the original position. And the veil of ignorance is the likelihood that you would not know how you are going to be born as. You do not know if you would be rich in that society or you would be a poor person, whether you would be a white American, a black African, a mixed Asian, whether you would born as a Hindu or a Christian. So that veil of ignorance, it prompts people to create a society in which principles are just. So if you are not aware in which position you are going to be born, then you would try to seek a society that is built upon just principle. You would ensure that benefits are distributed across different strata. You would seek parity and equality in all terms. You would see principles that are not discriminatory. So this thought experiment, it is about the rationality. Then, on the other hand, Amartya Sen's idea of justice, it challenges rigid social and political framework, which need to be dismantled. And he argues for a more comparative approach that focus on actual capabilities and freedoms people enjoy. So the rigid framework he's talking about, most social one, social and political, but social and that related to class. So these rigid framework should be avoided. Such conservatism should be avoided in social, economic, and political terms. So in his idea of justice, a person would be free if he has the opportunity to develop his potential, his capability. Now let's have a look at evolution of the concept of justice. First, ancient period. So during the ancient period, especially Greco-Roman Empire, Plato said justice is doing one's work and not meddling with what is not one's own, a principle of non-interference. So this kind of activity it ensures social harmony And the social harmony or the social equilibrium that is maintained, it nudges everyone to pursue their own craft, so that each class they perform their own function. The rulers rule, soldiers defend, and producers work. Now, according to Aristotle, one of the disciples of Plato, he focused on distribution and correction, distributive and corrective justice, which meant that it is not about giving people freedom from interference. It is also about correcting injustices. So he meant that justice will be the thing when equals are treated equally and unequals are treated unequally. So when you say equals are treated equally, it means if you are able-bodied and if you have supple resources, sufficient adequate resources, then you would be placed together and you would be competed amongst yourself. That is the principle of treating equal equally. But what if you are physically disabled or economically, socially backward? So these condition, the social and economic one, they do not appear. They're not perceptive, but still they are conditioned that disable people from achieving their potential. So in that case, all those people they should be placed in a pool of unequals. Then they can be competed amongst themselves. So it's like the same thing. You cannot make allow it to raise a able-bodied with a physically disabled person. That would not be fair. If you're going to race Usain Bolt with someone who is on wheelchair, then it's not difficult to understand what kind of injustice this will be. Then proceed on to the idea of justice during medieval period. So most of the students of world history they are aware that the middle period was a period of dark times, a period that was rife with superstition, cold beliefs, and the hegemony of church, hegemony of religion. So this was a time in which rationality was not advocated. The help of rationality was not taken. And people believed everything that was dark. People believed everything that was supernatural, everything that was superstitious. So it won't be difficult to understand here that justice during medieval period would be connected to same ecclesiastical thing, same supernatural superstitious thing. So here it was connected to divine law and natural law, and the most concept of medieval period regarding justice they were influenced by church and religious morality. Now forwarding to modern period, so this dark age it came to an end with the first light of Renaissance, and after which most of the principles, most of the religious things, they were disbanded, they were separated from other spheres of people's life, and rationality it was advocated in most of the spheres. So here the concept of justice is shifted from divine interpretation to human reason and social contract. So this one is rationality, and then justice about social contract, how people come to coexist with each other. So that agreement, whether written or spoken, that is known as social contract. So in modern period, after Renaissance, after Enlightenment period, such modulations of rationality and social contract they were frequently resorted to, and most of these ideas they were influenced by philosophers such as Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, and these political philosophers they discuss justice in terms of rights, duties, and the role of state. Now let's proceed with the types and dimension of justice. First one is legal justice, that is justice that is based on law, applying legal principle that distribute for all that is due in fair matter to all individual. So when I say in political terms and what is due, so most of the things they will be related to political sphere. Then Here, this legal justice, it is advocated in courts and the legal system. Second type is distributive justice, which is again the idea of Aristotle, which concerned with fair distribution of wealth and correcting the historical injustices. And this idea, distributive justice, is form the very basis of welfare policies and affirmative action undertaken by states. Now, the third one is corrective or rectificatory justice. It is about correcting wrongs or injustices that are done to individual, and most of it they are related to criminal cases and compensating the victims. Fourth one, social justice. It is a modern dimension that emphasizes fairness in society, that includes most of the social principle or social platform that should be equally shared by all those who belong to a society. It includes tackling poverty, ensuring healthcare, education, and eliminating discrimination. The fifth one is environmental and global justice, that is a contemporary dimension. It includes giving, ensuring justice for future generation, and that would be done only if the present resources they are not exhausted by indiscriminatory or blind exploitation. And it also ensures that all resources they are fairly distributed globally. Now let's have a look at major theories and thinkers on justice. First, Plato and his ideal justice, his famous work, The Republic, and his justice, it ensures social harmony where everyone perform their natural role, principle of non-interference. And here, this principle of justice, it is linked to virtue and good life. And in one of the previous video, I have explained this, that most of the traditional political theory, they revolve around the principles of ethics, virtues, morality, and only a few of them were based on reality. And one of the pioneer of such traditional thinking was Plato, and most of his ideas still considered utopian. So what he believed, what he considered to be just, to be virtuous in his time, are still not achievable. Then Aristotle's distributive and corrective justice, his work Nicomachean Ethics, he emphasized proportionate equality. Equals should be treated equally, unequals unequally, and he advocated rewarding people based on merit and contribution. So it's one half of carrot and stick policy. So stick has been removed, only carrot is there. So he was kind of a believer of incentivized justice. Incentivized justice means if people are believing, if people are behaving in just manner, then they should be rewarded. Because if you reward them, then this will create a psychological condition. If you are aware about this principle, classical conditioning in psychology, in which the bell rings and with it food comes, and then the dog who is trained to uh, react at the sound of bell, he with some frequency, after some repetitions, he came to associate ringing of bell with the arrival of food. So in the same way, this classical condition psychological principle, it has been emphasized by Aristotle in the same incentivized justice principle. Now, in the words of Thomas Hobbes, he said justice emerges when individuals agree to a social contract. Social contract here, which means the condition by which people agree to coexist. And this social contract is that when there is no law, if there is no social contract between individuals and state, then this will be a condition of anarchy, a lawless condition. Then if there is no law, then justice and injustice, they do not matter. Then comes the rules of jungle, might is right. Whoever is powerful will resort to such his own doing. That maybe virtuous or cruel. Then, in the words of John Locke, justice is based on natural rights, the rights of life, liberty, and property, and it is the role of state to protect these rights. Then comes John Rawls' theory of justice, that is a modern landmark and the concept of justice. His work, A Theory of Justice, he proposed original position and veil of ignorance. And here, as I've explained, this thought experiment, it is a proposition or it is a prompt to people so that they design principles that are just. And so if they do not know their place in society, who they are going to be born as, then they will design a society that is built on just principle. Now, his two key principles: first, equal liberty principle, which means equal basic rights for all. Then, his difference principle, that inequalities, they are justified only if they benefit the least advantage. And again, this merit system I have explained time and again with the example of UPSC, that if there are inequalities like between rich and poor, if this example of UPSC is not enough, take example of some the capitalism scenario. Like right now in the same condition, anybody is thinking about starting an economic venture. It may be starting like a simple shop. Now, he's aware that there are many shops in his surrounding, many shops in the neighborhood, many shops in the world. And all of these shops, they are competing amongst themselves. Now, the situation is unequal. Some shops are bigger, some smaller. And to compete with them and to enrich himself, that's the purpose by which people undertake such economic ventures. So, in order to enrich himself, opportunities should be there. कुछ opportunities होनी चाहिए that in such an unequal situation, दूसरी shops के पास भी पैसा नहीं है, and he is just starting a venture, which means in terms of being rich, he is penniless right now. But in that economic unequal situation, if opportunities are present, then such inequalities are justified. Because even if he does not have anything, still he has the opportunity. And by this opportunity, by his sheer hard work, by his smart work, and by his luck, he will enrich himself sooner or later. But what if inequalities are there, but opportunities are not there? Like kind of a situation, a discriminatory situation, कि शॉप्स जो हैं सब अमीर लोगों की हैं एंड अमीर और पावरफुल लोगों की है, और वो किसी नए आदमी को मार्केट में एंट्री नहीं देना चाहते हैं. एंड जो भी इस अनइक्वल सिचुएशन में एक शॉप खोलने की कोशिश करेगा, एंड हिज ऑप्शंस, हिज इनिशिएटिव, they would be dismantled, they would be shattered, they would be collapsed. So this will be a situation of injustice. So that's the difference principle. Inequalities can be there, but opportunity should also be there. And it is the opportunities, by taking help of them, the least advantage, they can walk up the social ladder. And he shifted justice towards fairness and equality. Now, the concept of Amartya Sen, the capability approach, his work, The Idea of Justice, and he said, justice is not about institution, but about improving people's capabilities in terms of health, physical capability, education capability, their lifelong freedom, so that they can live a better life. So he emphasized practical outcomes over theoretical perfection. So he is about developing the innate potential in everyone. And he was right about it, because if you see ourselves in evolutionary terms, then most of us, whichever society we belong to, whichever biological race we belong to, whichever culture we belong to, um, deep down we are same. We are Homo sapiens with same structure, same DNA, same muscles, same cellular and molecular chemistry, and same DNA that match across all the cultures, people from all walks of life, whether rich, poor, whether socially advantaged, disadvantaged, whether from America or Nigeria, and all of us we have a cranial capacity of 1350 cc. Cranial capacity means brain size. So everything is same, just some minute genetical differences that lead to differences in appearance. Other than that, we are equal. So in that sense, everyone is born with the same potential, and that potential need to be harnessed. And Amartya Sen, he advocated for enhancing such capability. Now, in the words of Karl Marx, he he was about the class struggle. So his justice, it also revolved around abolishing class structure between bourgeois and proletariat, between the owner class and the working class, and only after abolition of such a class that, according to him, an equal society can be created. Then let's have a look at the relationship between justice and the state. So the role of state in ensuring justice, it is central in political theory, because just the state, the government, it is created for the very purpose, created for people. People are not created by state. So this is not a vice versa situation. This is not a reciprocating situation. People were already there. People were already there 3,000, 300,000 years ago. Then our primate stock were already there 3 million years ago. And some form of life still existed around 4 billion years ago. So it is not about life forms. Life form has always existed, but the state has been created by people so that something can be done about their life. And that something, it revolves around the principle of justice, equality, fairness, liberty. So the core role of any state, it is to ensure that justice prevails. Then in liberal state, they focus on legal and political justice, which means that justice would be ensured in legal and political terms. Then in the welfare state, they focuses on distributive and social justice, that people, if they are not capable enough, then some enabling situations, enabling conditions can be provided for them, such as the basic necessities can be provided them. Some welfare schemes can be generated, welfare schemes can be implemented. Now, as a socialist state, they emphasizes economic justice, that wealth and economic opportunities, they will be redistributed, and any forms of class exploitation would be eliminated. And India is a classic example where all the three forms of justice have been integrated into the constitution. Justice in social terms, in political terms, and economic terms. Now, the relationship between justice and human rights. So, the deep connection is obvious, but how is it that the right to equality, freedom, dignity, and participation in governance, they are all justice-based rights? That you are human, that's why you have human rights. In other words, you have rights because you have been born as human, whichever way you see it. But there are certain rights that you download when you born as a human. So these rights, they're inherently related with the concept of justice. It's not that you have been given right, but justice is not there. Then rights will be meaningless. Then in the concept of the UN's UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is grounded on the idea of global justice. So here you can see the largest institution that encompass most of the countries, most of the population. It also talks about the relationship, the deep relationship between human rights and the justice. Now, let's have a look at justice in the Indian context. First, constitutional reason. The preamble of Indian Constitution, it talks about social, economic, and political justice. Then we have directives, DPSPs that has been that are directions that are given to states to work for the welfare of people, and these directions they promote social welfare and justice. Now, legal framework in context of India. First, fundamental rights in Part 3, they ensure political and social, civil justice. Then, by the, the implementation of DPSPs, the economic justice dimension is also addressed by affirmative action, by reservation policies, by welfare policies, so that such distributive and social justice is ensured. Next comes the role of India's judiciary. The Supreme Court of India, the guardian of Constitution, has often interpreted laws that expanded the meaning of justice. So we know the right to privacy, Article 21, the most dynamic fundamental right in India's constitution. It has been it has been interpreted in multiple ways, interpreted in different ways, and this multiple interpretation it led to its expansion. And now Article 21, the right to life, it includes everything that makes a life meaningful. Now, let's proceed on to the concept of sovereignty. So, sovereignty as a concept in political science, it signifies the supreme and absolute power of the state. It refers to the authority of the state to govern itself without any external or internal interference. So, sovereignty here is non interference by both sides. No internal factor and no external factor can stimulate, can influence how a sovereign, how any state is governing itself. And early thinkers like Jean Bodin, Thomas Hobbes, they advocated for absolute sovereignty, which means any state or any government, it is given absolute power to regulate its affair, which may include throttling the individual rights. Then Hobbes' Leviathan, it symbolizes the sovereign's role as a guarantor of peace and security. So again, when a ruler is undertaking, if his ruler's thinking solely in terms of law and order or peace and security, then individual rights or the concept of justice, it would be trampled upon. Then sovereignty is crucial because it establishes the independent status of a state. This independent status, it distinguishes it from other associations or group like other NGOs, multinational corporations, bilateral associations, bilateral grouping, multilateral groupings, regional groups. So this status is important because without sovereignty, a state cannot exercise control over its territory, population, and resources. So sovereignty is also concept that is related to legitimacy, authenticity. That some organization, the state as an organization, it has been legitimized. It has been authenticated by the people to act on its behalf. So this legitimacy, it provides the power, it fuels the very existence of state as a group. Now let's have a look at the origin and evolution of the concept of sovereignty. So this idea has evolved over time. During medieval period, sovereignty is what it was fragmented during feudalism. Ancient period is not included because the concept of nation state or concept of state, it is very recent, especially after the Treaty of Westphalia. Before that, They were kingdoms, they were principalities, they were small provinces, large provinces, some republics, but the concept of state was not there. Then, during medieval period, sovereignty it was fragmented, especially it was controlled and existed by feudalism. In short, feudalism as a concept, it revolves around the concept of land and security. In medieval time, any kingdom, any large province, it demarcated power by distributing land amongst large, powerful vassals. Those vassals they control a large piece of land, and in return for that, they provided two things to the kings or emperor. First, the revenue that is collected, some of it was kept for maintenance, for their own maintenance, and rest of it it went to the state treasury. So this was one of the way uh, kings and emperors they came to have large treasuries. And then second way, the same vassals they had some stationed army, some form of stationed army, a kind of protection. So during expeditions or uh, large or small wars, king frequently rely on such vassals to send army during the time of need. In other words, like let's say this is a large kingdom which has been divided into six small principalities. Now each principality or each piece of land was controlled by a vassal. So the right over this land, they have been bequeathed, they have been given to these vassals in return for first revenue and second security. So during any such pressing time like expedition, war, rebellion, these vassals they provided the kings with the required manpower. So this system it was known as feudalism. और हमारे इंडिया में भी सेम सिस्टम था, स्पेशली ड्यूरिंग द पीरियड्स ऑफ सल्तनत, उससे पहले भी, देन ड्यूरिंग द पीरियड्स ऑफ मुगल. ये ब्रिटिश के आने के बाद, यूरोपियन पावर्स के आने के बाद दिस सिस्टम इट गॉट चेंज्ड. सो पावर इट वाज डिवाइडेड अमंग किंग्स, फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स, वैसल. ये हायरार्की है पूरी, वैसल से स्टार्ट होती, फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स, वैसल्स, फिर उनके भी बाद भी, क्योंकि हर एक वैसल जो है ही डिड नॉट हिमसेल्फ कंट्रोल अ लार्ज स्वेथ ऑफ टेरिटरी. सो अगेन फिर वो जो जैसे इंडिया में होता था कि किंग ने गवर्नर को एक पर्टिकुलर पीस ऑफ लैंड दिया, गवर्नर ने फिर वो जो है बड़े बड़े जमींदार जो हैं उनको दिया, द जमींदार फिर उसको और डिवाइड करके छोटे छोटे जमींदार को दिया. सो दिस हायरार्की वर्क द सेम वे, but the actual power it was held by kings, feudal lords, and the church. So church during the medieval time it held a supreme sway over people and the state. So बहुत सारा जो जमीन है, large piece of land, large plot of land also was also coveted and controlled by the church. Then no single entity held absolute authority. So no one was supreme during the medieval period. Now the rise of nation state, which started with the Treaty of Westphalia 1648, that the modern concept of sovereignty emerged. So the Treaty of Westphalia, जितने भी students हैं political science के, they are very well aware of. The Treaty of Westphalia was the first instance or first initiative that started the process of the formation of nation state. क्योंकि उसी के साथ जो concept जो हैं treaty में के जो treaty की conditions हैं, like the right to self determination, the very basis for formation of any nation state, कि कोई particular people हैं, group of people, whether they have come together by ethnic, religious or any kind of ties, they have the right to self determine how they are going to be ruled as. Then this also included the principle of sovereignty. Then again the principle of coexistence. So, with these three principles, the Treaty of Westphalia, it set the stage for rise of nation state. Then, by this treaty, states they became recognized as supreme authority over their territory and people. And this uh, this treaty it laid the foundation of Westphalian model of sovereignty, that is the model of coexistence or non-interference in each other's domestic affairs. During the modern period, with the rise of democracies, the location of sovereignty it shifted from monarchs to people. क्योंकि democracy से पहले the power was usually controlled by such monarchs. Monarchs means single rulers, kings, single kings. But democracy आते ही, as the very name suggests, democracy is about rule by people. So the right to rule by these monarchs, they gradually gave way to the principle of democracy and power centers. They got shifted, and now sovereignty it is not absolute but balanced with rights, laws, and international obligation. So in present time, even people of any territory they are not sovereign either. Even if they have the legitimacy, they have the power to rule among themselves, but then it is the uh, the law that reigns supreme. That's why we say it is the rule of law. So in the present time, the rule of law it cannot be overlooked. And when we consider rule of law, it is not just about constitution, it is also about international obligations. Now let's have a look at types of sovereignty. First one is legal sovereignty, that refers to legal authority to make laws within a territory. So in Indian case, it is the parliament that is legally sovereign. Now political sovereignty, it is the actual power that is exercised by those in control. So they may be politicians, elites, oligarchs, or even social groups. And in India's case, it is the representatives that are elected by people that are politically sovereign. Now, internal sovereignty, it means to rule over its own territory and citizens, which includes lawmaking, enforcing orders, and managing resources. So, internal sovereignty, also known as domestic sovereignty, it is about the relationship between the representative and people. Now, external sovereignty, the it is the independence of any state in international arena, and it is also the right to enter into treaties, trade, and maintain defense. Now, popular sovereignty, that power is ultimately reside with people who elect their rulers. So it is very true in case of democracies, especially India, where power it is with people, and this concept is prominent in democracies based on principle of consent. Now let's have a look at theories and thinkers on sovereignty. First one is, so this name it has two pronunciations. First, the British or American pronunciation, which refers it to it as Jean Bodin, whereas the French pronunciation it calls John Boda. Well, I'm going to proceed with the British pronunciation, Jean Bodin, and his work, Six Books of the Republic. He defines sovereignty as absolute and perpetual power of the state, and he considered that sovereignty is indivisible, unlimited, and lies with the sovereign. So he was more in favor of a very centralized and controlled sovereignty, a sovereignty that was absolute and lied with those who are in power. Now, in the words of Thomas Hobbes, his famous work Leviathan, and again, like John Boda, Jean Bodin, he advocated for an absolute sovereign that prevent chaos and anarchy. So Hobbes was more in favor of preventing maintaining law and order. So here, if one principle is prioritized than other principles such as justice, equality, liberty. They are dressed into backstage. So that's why he advocated absolute sovereignty, especially this sovereignty. It is necessary during pressing times of war, times of rebellion, some internal or external skirmishes. उस उन सब टाइम में एब्सोल्यूट सोवरेनिटी ज़रूरी होती है, वो इंडिया के कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भी मैंशन है. बट उसके अलावा to look at the state of affair only via the lens of law and order, it deprioritizes other important issues. And but then Thobbs said sovereign power is necessary for protection of life and property. Now, in the words of John Locke, his work, Two Treatises of Government, he rejected the concept of absolute sovereignty but argued for a limited sovereignty that is based on consent of the people, consent of the governed, and the state's role was to protect these natural rights. Now, D. Jean Jacques Rousseau, his works, The Social Contract, he introduced the idea of general will, which means that true sovereignty it rests with the collective will of the people. So he was in favor of popular sovereignty, and it can also be said as common sovereignty. That ultimately, what is sovereign is what people decide it to be. Now, John Austin's legal sovereignty. So he defined sovereignty in legal terms. So, according to him, sovereign, it is a person or body whom the people habitually obey. So, in Indian case, if we look the case of India via John Austin's principle, then our legal sovereignty it would be the constitution, because most of the people, even the people who we have given our sovereignty to, they also obey the constitution, the legal constitution. Now let's have a look at characteristic of sovereignty. First, absoluteness. So traditionally, sovereign power is supreme and unlimited, but in present time, it is also absolute, but it works with some terms and conditions that sovereignty it should not trample rights, it should not meddle with people's life, it should address various welfare concerns, it should obey various laws, it should comply with the rule of law, it should look at, or it should at least have respect for international laws. Now, the second characteristic, permanence. That sovereignty it continues as long as the state exists. Then the third concept, inalienability, which means it cannot be transferred or divided. And the fourth principle, indivisibility, that true sovereignty it cannot be shared or fragmented. So both these concepts they are similar, but they work in different sphere. One is vertical, one is working vertically, other is horizontally. However, in modern times, these characteristics they have been changed due to growing complexity in governance and international relations. Now, let's have a look at challenges to classical sovereignty. First one is globalization. So earlier, the state they were absolute, but right now they are interdependent in trade, technology, and diplomacy. And then there are many institutions like UN, WTO, IMF, World Bank, many regional multilateral group. They also hold large influence on national policies. So this independence is not no longer there. Second challenge is about human rights regime. That international law they protect human rights. So this puts a limit on the state's power, on the sovereign power to encroach upon human rights. So when I said here that in modern times this absolute feature is not there, and any such authority, first it has to face the rule of law, and second it cannot ignore or it should at least respect international law. Then the third challenge is about rise of non-state actors. So non-state actors means those actors which do not belong to a state, but still they hold significant sway, significant influence over the lives of people. So these non-state actors such as multinational corporations, NGOs, terrorist groups, digital platforms, and in present time, the social media, the digital media, deepfake, fake news, and recently AI, metaverse. So all of them they can be clubbed as digital platform. They have come to hold large influence over global and domestic politics. Now, next one, next challenge is about supranational institutions. So such institutions like European Union, many treaty agreements, many trade agreements, many regional groups. So these groups, they which are bound by formal agreement, they cannot be overlooked. So they also put a check on the power of sovereignty. Now the concept of sovereignty in Indian context, the first, the constitutional provision. So preamble of India, it declares India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So which means India is sovereign itself. India is ruling itself and it is not influenced by any internal or external affairs. And then sovereignty in India, it lies with people. The second context, parliamentary sovereignty versus judicial review. So here, instead of judicial review, we can also club it with the rule of law. So it is debate between parliamentary sovereignty versus rule of law. So Indian Parliament, it makes law, but the Supreme Court, it can strike down if it is unconstitutional. So even if Parliament has the sovereignty, Parliament has the right to make a law, but this right is not absolute. It cannot make any bogus right. It cannot make any right that it can encroach upon the fundamental rights of people. So if it does so, if it makes any law that is unconstitutional, then Supreme Court, via resorting to the rule of law or via the principle of judicial review that is given to it by Article 32, it can strike down such law as unconstitutional. So this also reflects the principle of constitutional sovereignty or principle of legal sovereignty. Then the external sovereignty. So India is free to conduct foreign policy and enter into international agreement. But then India, it has to respect international norms and obligations in various institutions, multinational institutions such as WTO, United Nations, etc. Now the modern interpretation of sovereignty. So this dynamic concept, it has chipped away at the traditional absoluteness, but the sovereignty is still there. But the thing is, it is dynamic and evolving. Now the modern concept, first one is shared sovereignty. Now any sovereignty, it is divided between the center and state provinces, especially in federal country or quasi-federal countries. Then conditional sovereignty means that any state, it must protect human rights and ensure good governance. The failure of which it may invite international action, and that international action would come later. The failure to protect human rights and misgovernance, they will invite the ire of people, because the concept of democracy, it says the sovereignty, it is with people. So if you do not, if you overlook people, overlook people's good lives, then people will behave in some way. Now the next, digital sovereignty. Now many institutions or many new challenges, especially over cyberspace, data and digital infrastructure, they have provided new dimension of sovereignty. especially just such as many most of the cyberspace, it it lies in the virtual world, except the servers. सर्वर के अलावा बाकी सब जो साइबर स्पेस है इट इज़ इन वर्चुअल वर्ल्ड, सो दे आर नो डिफाइंड टेरिटोरीज. And then most of the these big corporations, most of the big corporation, the search engine companies, the e-commerce companies, they evade the taxes and shift their taxes to tax havens. So tax havens वो जगह होती है जहाँ पे आप अगर कंपनी इस्टेब्लिश करते हैं, यू डू नॉट नीड टू पे लार्ज अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्सेस, ओनली मिनिमल अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स. सो कंपनीज, बिग कॉरपोरेशंस क्या करती है, ये इन जो टैक्स हेवेंस हैं लाइक हवाना हो गया, जो कैरिबियन कंट्रीज़ हैं, वहाँ पे उसका कंट्री में कोई एक सेल कंपनी बनाती है. सेल मीन्स दैट कंपनी इज़ बोगस, इट इज़ नॉट engage in any real activity, it is just there so that these big corporation, ये एक पर्टिकुलर कंट्री में, इंडिया के अंदर अमेज़ॉन या गूगल हो गया, फेसबुक हो गया, मेटा, व्हाट्सएप, एक्स वगैरह, जितना भी उनका रेवेन्यू यहाँ से जनरेट होता है, देन वो सब जो है दे ट्रांसफ़र इट टू द टैक्स हेवेंस इन दो शेल कंपनीज. अब उन शेल कंपनीज में वहाँ पे तो उनको कोई टैक्स देना नहीं है या बहुत ही कम टैक्स देना है, सो बाकी जो जितना भी प्रॉफिट है वो बच जाता है. बट दिस चिप्स अवे एट द सोवरेनिटी ऑफ ए पर्टिकुलर स्टेट, क्योंकि ये जो टैक्स जो है, बहुत सारा टैक्स है, वो सारा का सारा टैक्स जो है अगर वो वहाँ पे शिफ्ट हो जाएगा तो फिर जो जो एलिमेंट्स हैं, जैसे यहाँ पे मैंने कहा कि कंडीशनल सोवरेनिटी में, कि अगर स्टेट के पास पैसा ही नहीं होगा और ये सारा जो साइबर स्पेस है ये सारा का सारा अगर टैक्स हेवन में शिफ्ट कर देगा, तो देन हाउ इज द पर्टिकुलर स्टेट इज गोइंग टू प्रोटेक्ट द ह्यूमन राइट्स और स्पेंड फॉर द वेलफेयर प्रोजेक्ट्स. सो ऐसे में सोवरेनिटी विल कम अंडर स्कैनर. देन द कंसेप्ट ऑफ डेटा. सो डेटा इज कंसिडर्ड अ न्यू ऑयल. सो डेटा इज लाइक large amount of information. Before the contemporary times, any person who is engaging into any economic activity, in any economic venture, they needed this particular information, क्योंकि उसके बिना आप कैसे कोई इकोनॉमिक वेंचर स्टार्ट कर पाएंगे. जैसे मैं अगर अपना ही कहूँ, लाइक टीचिंग का, अब आई हैव इंफॉर्मेशन एआई से, बुक से, बहुत सारे इंफॉर्मेशन जो है वो मिल जाती है, डेटा जो है मिल जाता है, देन आई नो व्हाट टू टीच, हाउ टू टीच. सेम अगर मुझे एक हेल्थ के अंदर कोई प्रोडक्ट बनाना है, कोई मेडिकल प्रोडक्ट हो गया, देन इफ़ मेरे पास ये इंफॉर्मेशन आ जाए कि किन किन लोगों को क्या क्या समस्या है, व्हाट हेल्थ कंडीशन पीपल आर गोइंग थ्रू, डायबिटीज़ की हो रही है, हाइपरटेंशन की हो रही है, एनसीडी नॉन कम्युनिकेबल डिजीज़ है, कार्डियोवैस्कुलर डिजीज़ है, सेरेब्रोवैस्कुलर डिजीज़ है, ऑस्टियोस्केलेटल है, जेनेटिक डिजीज़ हैं, साइकोलॉजिकल है. तो अगर मेरे पास वो प्रोफाइलिंग आ जाए, वो सारा डेटा आ जाए कि पर्टिकुलर कंट्री में, न्यू दिल्ली के अंदर दे आर अराउंड let's say 1.2 million youth, they are reeling under depression and they are looking for some effective treatments that can help them live a meaningful life. So ये information 1.2 million, for me 1.2 customers, 1.2 clients, and this, if I undertake this economic venture, especially in health term, this thing would generate lots of profit. So ये information जो है ये जो present data से मिलती है, but then this thing, it is about data monetization. अब data जो है ये जो भी जितने भी large corporations हैं इनके servers पे हैं, and then those servers they lie outside of India. So information यहाँ से बाहर के हैं, but most of the country they have woken up recently to this deluge that the precious information, it is going out of their country, and the same information can be used by the state for the benefit of people, or if even if it is not about benefit of people, any state can bring all the information, that club all the information together, and it can monetize, it can generate revenue out of that monetization. So उसकी वजह से ही जो डेटा लोकलाइजेशन लॉ है, पॉलिटिकल साइंस में आपने पढ़े होंगे कि एवरी कंट्रीज, most of the nations, they require these large corporations, these digital companies, to save most of the local data in local servers. Now finally, the environmental sovereignty, which is that uh, which entity is responsible to manage natural resources in sustainable manner, and that too with respecting global climate commitments. So this environmental sovereignty in present time, it is a responsibility that is shared by many people. There are many NGOs, the state government, most of the aware and informed citizens. So all of them, they share this environmental sovereignty. So this is it. In the next video, we are going to proceed with citizenship and gender. Thank you very much, and subscribe the channel.